In 2017, in an attempt to branch out to new reading demographics, DC announced a new imprint for graphic novels aimed specifically at young adult readers called DC Inc. Eventually, the line would be rebranded to the less complicated DC Graphic Novels for Young Adults.
The line would focus on telling stories of many of the DC pantheon as individuals coming up in the world and finding their own unique heroic purposes, as well as also going through many of the various trials and tribulations that teenagers tend to go through.
And of course, comic book fans, being the warm and welcoming individuals that they're known to be, openly celebrated this and didn't immediately begin griping about books they could just as easily, ignore.
Look, I certainly understand that there are people out there who maybe don't want to relive their high school days or, don't want to see characters like the Batman family or Mira from Aquaman in angsty CW teen drama type situations. But again, you could just ignore the book and not buy it. The books aren't necessarily for you, and that's okay.
I know. I'm shouting at a wall.
Still, there are some titles that are at least a tiny bit more appropriate. Case in point, any of the stories following characters from the Teen Titans. I mean, it's literally in the name. Most notably, there's a series by Cami Garcia and Gabriel Piccolo that's focused on Beast Boy and Raven in a quasi-romantic comedy-esque setting.
And then you have today's story, which is about the relationship between Starfire and her teenage plus-sized goth lesbian daughter. Suffice to say, this really did not quiet those naysayers. Anyway, this is I Am Not Starfire.
Mandy Anders was born into the superhero life. A life she has very little interest for as she dyes the naturally red hair she shares with her mother, jet black. Now granted, her mother is Starfire of the Teen Titans, or just Titans depending on what day of the week it is, and she's a hero renowned for her looks as much for heroism, and that's left the always plus-sized Mandy feeling a little outside the norm. Not that Starfire is necessarily a bad mother. She's always encouraging Mandy in her pursuits and trying not to be judgmental when Mandy goes outside said norm. But, teenagers. In particular, Mandy is trying to hide the fact that she does not plan to go to college and instead just wants to live in Paris.
Okay, a little explanation as to Starfire's backstory. She is Princess Coriander of the planet Tamaran, and all Tamaranians have super abilities like the ability to fly, super strength, and the ability to fire energy blasts called starbolts, thanks to their ability to control their emotions. Now, for reasons we'll get into later, Starfire fled her home planet and came to Earth, where she would join up with the Teen Titans and become the longtime paramour of Dick Grayson, aka Robin or Nightwing. Now, briefly, Cori did maintain the identity of Corianders as a civilian name, but I think it was eventually dropped due to the fact that, let's face it, someone with giant orange skin like that really isn't going to blend in well with the rest of society.
Mandy's only confidant is Lincoln, a crypto-anarchist attempting to bring down the model minority philosophy from the inside who often helps Mandy avoid Titan groupies who are seeking an in via her. The two head to class and are then split up for a literature assignment where they're assigned various partners. Lincoln winds up with a brain-dead jock named Devin, and Mandy ends up with her longtime crush and uber-popular girl, Claire. Mandy just fumbles her way around with Claire as the two try to discuss their topic, trying to view William Shakespeare's Hamlet through a modern lens.
They're completely missing the obvious idea, which is just do a report about Hamlet 2.
Rock me, sexy Jesus, he died for our sins.
The two make plans to meet up at Claire's to go over the assignment a bit further, and it dogs Mandy throughout the rest of the day. As the last time she was at Claire's home, it was for a 10th birthday party where Mandy was forced to give the traditional Tamaranian gift of a wet loaf of bread, which in turn led to further ostracization. Getting pulled back into the midst of time causes Mandy to experience some very explosive fun during chemistry class. Still, Mandy makes it to Claire's, and the two slowly bond as they settle on the idea of taking a feminist view of Hamlet through the eyes of the character of Ophelia. Mandy once more points out her plans to skip college, and Claire already knows this, as it turns out Mandy flipped out while trying to take the SAT and ran out of the room. Mandy avoids talking further, as the arrival of Claire's friends brings about a signal that it's time to return home. Mandy begins making her way home towards the slowly oncoming night and the malfunctioning streetlights, which causes her to experience the sensation that she's being watched. Mandy arrives home to Doug, Starfire's date for the evening, and he broaches the subject of college, which causes Mandy to just sprint off to her room. Starfire attempts to check on her daughter, but just gets the cold shoulder.
I hope you've all enjoyed Doug's contribution to this story, because that's all there is.
The next day at school, Lincoln teases Mandy about hanging out with her crush, which Mandy plays off before heading off to gym class where baseball is being played. Claire leads off as the first batter, and Mandy heads off to right field.
They point to the sky and I look up above, and a baseball
Flies over Mandy's head due to the fact that she's completely spaced out and not paying any attention, which means there will be no after-game meal at Pizza Hut.
That's why I play in right field, way out where the dandelions grow.
As a proud sponsor of Little League Baseball, Pizza Hut welcomes all the kids who make it great.
Making it great.
Still, Claire winds up inviting Mandy to join her clique in skipping class. Claire's friends attempt to mock Mandy about skipping out on college, and she teases them back, saying that due to her alien heritage, she has to go through some type of blood sacrifice to make any type of advancement in life. Claire's friends are put off, though she is actually thoroughly entertained, as it gets them to stop teasing Mandy. Heading back to school, Mandy gloats about being able to hang out with Claire to Lincoln before returning home to find Starfire waiting with some Chinese takeout and a gigantic pile of college brochures. Once again, Mandy snaps at her mother and just heads off to her room. Starfire tries to find out what's going on, as Mandy's 18th birthday is in a couple weeks, but again, Mandy is just unresponsive.
A lot of Mandy's problems stem from the fact that she never developed her powers that Starfire expected to have happen, which led Starfire to give up around the time Mandy turned 16, Mandy feeling like a disappointment to her mother. Also, there's the subject of Mandy's biological father, which the general populace has generally assumed to be Dick Grayson or Nightwing. Obviously, Dick Grayson's identity isn't known, but you get the idea. However, the story would seem to indicate otherwise.
The next day at lunch, Claire approaches Mandy, admitting that she respects her choice not to go to college. The two bond once more and prepare to continue working on the report, this time at Mandy's, which is in the middle of holding a Titans meeting. But still, everyone manages to warm to Claire as they head out on patrol. Claire and Mandy continue to grow closer as they finish the report, and Claire hugs Mandy before leaving. The joy is short-lived, however, as Lincoln soon contacts Mandy with a message to check Claire's not Instagram, which is now full of selfies taken with the Titans, indicating that all this was an attempt to gain some clout by taking a picture with some superheroes. At school, Mandy angrily confronts Claire about using said clout before storming off to the supply closet to begin crying. Dejected, Mandy heads home where she's confronted by an irate Starfire. As it turns out, the school guidance counselors contacted her about Mandy running out on the SAT, but surprisingly enough, not about her cutting class recently. When Mandy tries to explain that she's not going to college, Starfire points out that Mandy needs to retake the test and that she should strive to be the best person she can. Mandy storms off to her room, revealing once more that she does not want to take the test, and she soon starts packing up her bags and texts Lincoln that she's running away from home. Starfire manages to track Mandy down to a nearby coffee shop. It's the closest coffee shop to their home, so it really wasn't that hard. And the two begin arguing again as they pass a gas station, which suddenly begins experiencing a weird power outage. Seemingly knowing what's happening, Starfire pleads with Mandy to come home with her, but it's too late, as Blackfire and her forces have arrived on Earth.
Blackfire, or Commander, is Starfire's older sister, who was usurped for the throne by Starfire because the latter developed her powers first. Blackfire would eventually develop her powers, but she would join a group called the Citadel and lead a revolt against the throne of Tamaran, which is what drove Starfire to flee and head to Earth.
Blackfire points out that Mandy's existence is a threat to her power, as she's now the only heir to the Tamaranian throne. So the two must face each other in mortal combat in order to see who takes over. Starfire points out that Mandy has no powers and thus really poses no threat, but to no effect. Still, both mother and daughter are taken so Starfire can explain what's about to happen to Mandy. The next day at school, Claire asks Lincoln about Mandy's whereabouts, but he's unresponsive. She tries to point out that she was not trying to angle for anything in taking those selfies, but he angrily points out that she knows the type of relationship Mandy has with her mother, and that was probably not the best way to get in with her. He's also well aware that Claire is also reciprocating Mandy's affections. Claire continues trying to make their case as she and Lincoln prepare to head off to the school's big lacrosse match taking place that afternoon.
Yeah, apparently the students at the school are allowed to just skip it for a sporting event. They don't need a cut slip or anything like that. Lucky.
Meanwhile, Starfire explains her history with Blackfire to Mandy. She admits that she ran away in fear when she had easily just faced her sister in the Citadel, but that her whole time on Earth was in trying to avoid further confrontation, especially since Mandy didn't develop any powers. That being said, Blackfire also didn't develop powers until later in her life, so there's a chance things could work out for Mandy, or that Starfire will just try to interfere to keep her daughter safe no matter what. Soon a time comes for the battle, not on Tamaran, but rather the lacrosse game at Mandy's high school.
You know, if I were that opposing lacrosse team, I would file a complaint because it seems to be tipping things out of their favor.
An armored Mandy steps onto the field much to the astonishment of her classmates, including Lincoln and Claire. However, Starfire manages to break free and begins challenging Blackfire, and the two begin fighting as Mandy heads for cover on an open-air athletics field. It's then that Starfire gets blasted out of the sky and Mandy soon rushes to her mother's side. Mandy tearfully apologizes to her mother and tells her to face her fears and not run away like she did. Blackfire grabs Mandy and throws her into one of the lacrosse nets, and the calls from the crowd of encouragement, particularly from Lincoln and Claire, causes Mandy's powers to awaken, and soon she's up in the air engaging in starbolt blasts with her estranged aunt. Mandy soon winds up pummeling Blackfire into submission on the ground, with only a recovered Starfire managing to calm things down. The Titans soon arrive to take Blackfire into custody and to stand trial for, let's just say, this little incident, and the lacrosse coach soon comes to Mandy asking for an autograph as she is now his daughter's hero. Over the next few weeks, Mandy is out on a press tour. As it turns out, the footage of Blackfire's attack has gone viral. It's an entirely new experience for her, especially since she keeps having to dodge questions about the identity of her father. She winds up missing a lot of school, and she later has to explain to Lincoln and Claire that this is mainly due to the fact that she's got to focus on superhero training now. And that Paris is out of the question, as she now has to prepare to retake the SATs, with Raven acting as her tutor. Still, Mandy and Claire get to exchange a kiss as she prepares for her 18th birthday party and preparing her new superhero outfit along the way. The party is short, as Mandy is allowed to leave for her first official date with Claire.
And that concludes I Am Not Starfire. How was it? Well, I do like the artwork in this story. I like that it's kind of light and airy. It's not overly dark and moody, and the teenagers actually look like real teenagers. They don't look like a bunch of GQ models. And I like a lot of the banter between the characters. I think that's kind of fun. There's some good humorous points in this story. I do think that it's nice. It's not overly dramatic and wrought with melodrama, so you're not going to get overwhelmed by stuff like that if that's a turnoff for you. If I do have a major problem with this, is that I think the pacing is just a little too fast. It leads to some of the characterization being very flat. I would have liked to have actually seen more of the backstory between Mandy and Starfire. I think that would have probably added a little bit more. Like, the whole idea of Mandy being upset that she never developed powers is just kind of crammed into one page. It felt like that needed more time to breathe. And I'll be honest again, as a superhero guy, I would like to have seen more of the Titans in this story. I think, again, just seeing more of that balance could have probably, seeing Mandy's relationship with them, could have, again, helped us expand the character out just a little bit. And, again, just other things make this seem a tiny bit flat and a little cliched at times. Again, we have, she falls in love with the popular girl in school that kid seems out of reach, but then is really down to earth and relatable, but then does the one stupid thing for apparent clout. So yeah, it does kind of fall a little bit flat in those aspects. And likewise, I think there's a little ham-handedness in this, for lack of a better term. I mean, it's pretty clear that Starfire named her daughter after Blackfire. I mean, come on. Blackfire's real name is Commander, and Starfire's daughter is Mandy. Like, I think they are trying to set up some type of sequel where Mandy plays Peacemaker or something, where they try to get the sisters to be more on common ground once again. But I guess we'll never know. I mean, this thing's been out for, I want to say, 3 or 4 years now, and again, most of the complaints are from the really bad people. So it doesn't really help that I don't know how well this necessarily did. A lot of the other DC young adult graphic novels have done pretty well. This one, I think, is mostly forgettable. Like I said, it's not worth really getting that worked up about. It's just kind of an okay story. I'm going to be giving I Am Not Starfire a C. And with that, we'll see. Well, with that, we'll see what we'll be doing next time on the... Let's try that again. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can support my work at patreon.com/CP Time for Cat Productions, where you can even request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so that you can be notified for further videos.